Donald Trump has never been a fan of Washington, and the feeling is mutual among most of its residents, who broke into spontaneous street parties after losing the White House. But hostility toward the former president has only grown since he left the city, with violent crime rising in the capital while falling from pre-pandemic peaks in other cities, prompting Trump to campaign for a federal takeover of this dirty area, and the shame that crime brings to our nation. Trump has repeatedly vowed to occupy the Capitol with federal troops, a tactic he flirted with at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 during his last year in office, telling conservative audiences last year that "I'm sending the National Guard until law and order is restored," and that he wouldn't even call the mayor. Washington, D.C. rightly rose to the top nationally in violent crime, making 2023 the city of the most deadly in more than 2 decades, even as violent crime has declined in nearly every other state in America. For example, nearby Baltimore, infamous for its crimes on the wire, saw its homicide rate drop in the most recent year. In D.C., on the other hand, shootings, murders, and carjackings rose sharply and spread to neighborhoods typically of such violence, including downtown busy with office workers, making many longtime residents feel unsafe for the first time. Headlines gather residents shot in DuPont Circle, subway station in front of Nationals Park, walking home from work. On Monday, a former Trump administration official was shot while waiting for his wife on K Street, known for being home to several of the city's white shoe legal and lobbying firms, apparently by accident. Trump, congressional Republicans, and their allies in the conservative media used Washington, where Democrats usually win about 90% of the presidential vote, to portray and justify the criminality of the entire Democratic Party before the November election. Needs more federal oversight. Longtime Capitol Hill attorney Eleanor Holmes Norton said the city needs more autonomy to fight crime, not less, because of the well-documented lack of coordination between the city's federal and local agencies. But he fears that even home rule, the law that first allowed D.C. residents to choose their own government in 1974, could be at risk. "I think he would do everything possible to prevent nationalization, but also to restore order," he said. "There is no doubt in my mind that if he regains the presidency, we could lose most of the control we have now in the city." What is behind the crime of the Capitol? There are countless causes and finger-pointing, and the D.C. Council, mayor, police, prosecutors, courts, and a poorly run crime lab are to blame. Brett Tolman, a former U.S. attorney appointed by George W. Bush and now head of the conservative criminal justice reform group Right on Crime, blamed the Washington Attorney General mainly for refusing to prosecute most cases. "We don't need to change the law. We don't need a president to come in and use the National Guard to take over the city," he said. "You just need a person, Republican or Democrat, to say, 'People to follow the law.'" D.C. Council made national headlines last year when it passed criminal code reform that was widely seen as too lenient. Congress used its power in the Capitol to kill the law, and President Joe Biden chose not to veto it, sending a clear message to Democrats that it was time to get tough on crime. Months later, as violent crime soared, the D.C. Council moved in a different direction, voting 12-1 to pass the first of several emergency crime-fighting laws that, among other things, makes it easier for police to detain suspects before trial. But Republicans have focused on the first measure, thrusting the city into the national spotlight at 2 congressional hearings in the past year. Trump repeatedly tried to move his criminal case out of Washington, arguing that he would not have a fair trial in the city, not only because the jury would be made up of mostly hostile residents of the city, but also because I am asking for a federal takeover of this a crime-ridden disgrace to our people. In December, he told Truth Social that Washington has made a dirty, crime-ridden death trap that the federal government must take over and properly manage, adding that the plan is a key part of his platform. Last week loss while campaigning in Vegas, Trump promised to seize our horribly mismanaged capital and rehabilitate it so it's no longer a nightmare of murder and crime. We are coming together. We have the toughest law enforcement in the country. We have no more crime and it looks good, Trump added.